Hi, welcome to the Times of Israel's Daily Briefing. It is Sunday, January 4th, and I'm Jessica Steinberg. I'm speaking today with Diaspora Affairs reporter Zev Stub and health editor Diana Bletter.
Good morning,
Good
Jessica.
morning to you both. Good to see you.
Good morning, Jessica.
Good morning, Shavua Tov. It is day 821 of the war. Following the capture of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Foreign Minister Gideon Saar declared that the U.S. acted as, quote, the leader of the free world, expressing hope that Jerusalem and Caracas can reestablish ties. Last night at anti-government protests in Tel Aviv's Habima Square, others also gathered in Haifa and Jerusalem to mark 3 years since the government's judicial overhaul. At the Tel Aviv protest, former Chief Justice Aharon Barak said in a video message telling anti-government protesters that Israel was no longer a liberal democracy. Meanwhile, in the south, ralliers gathered in 2 different locations calling for the release of the captive body of fallen police officer Ron Greeley, demanding his body be brought home before any progression to the second stage of the ceasefire deal. We will look at some other topics today, including Spain's trade restrictions against Israel that Zev reported on last week, Israeli emigration, as well as immigration to Israel, what's going on with those numbers, the ongoing struggles in the northern city of Kiryat Shmona from Diana, and some of the latest in Israeli science and research. Stay with us.
3 million Israelis are dealing with trauma since October 7th. To help Israelis heal, Hadassah is there, with the largest rehabilitation center in Jerusalem, world-renowned medical centers, and youth villages. It's said, saving a life saves the world. Imagine helping millions. This is Hadassah, a life-changing force in Israel and the world.
Zev, let's take your Diaspora Affairs hat, which is really what we're focusing on today. You had 2 back-to-back pieces about when Spain began blocking Israeli products imported from the West Bank, Golan Heights, and East Jerusalem. You wrote about the largest state-level embargo of products and services from Israel. You wrote about it from the local Jewish community reaction, but let's look at this overarching boycott and how you tackled it and what you found as you looked at it.
Yeah, I mean, Spain's been one of the most antagonistic countries against Israel, pretty much since the attacks of October 7, 2023. So what they've done in the last few months is they've launched what is believed to be the largest state-level boycott of Israel, basically since the Arab League boycotts, which is all the Arab countries that don't buy from us anymore, don't do trade with us. So in September, Spain passed a law providing for, quote, the urgent measures against the genocide in Gaza and support for the Palestinian population. So this was a pretty broad trade embargo, which came with a few different provisions, including a ban on imports or even the advertising of goods and services from what it calls the occupied territories, as well as a pretty large trade embargo on Israel. Basically, all weapons trade with Israel is forbidden, except for an exception built into the law where the country can make exceptions for reasons of national interest. So that law kind of went into effect in September, October, but they set a deadline of December 30th for the final implementation of all that. So December 30th was last Tuesday, and a few things happened on that day. Spain's finance ministry published a list of areas and zip codes from the West Bank, the Golan, and East Jerusalem, from where products cannot be imported anymore. So it published this list. It also requires now that all products imported from Israel to Spain have to have their location, their origin location stamped on the packaging. So that's a big blow to that. Number 2 that happened is, as I mentioned, there's also a ban on advertising of products and services from the what it calls the occupied territories. So the Consumer Affairs Ministry actually went on December 30th and gave warnings to several vacation rental sites, like Airbnb type sites, telling them that, you guys have properties advertised, in these territories in Israel. They must be removed immediately, or else. They didn't say exactly what the or else was. These are for Spanish tourists of vacation properties, in Israel, in the territories in Israel. So that was another kind of big step that showed that they're getting serious about implementation. Then there was a third step they took that day, which is a little bit more nuanced. The government published an exception to the ban on defense products for Airbus. Airbus is the international defense giant, which works in Israel, and the government published that an exception would be made for Airbus to continue importing into Spain, because they employ a lot of people within Spain, and there's a lot of important defense technology that's needed, and basically it would be too much of a problem for Spain to actually boycott these products.
Okay. Zev, do me a favor. Give us a few examples of what products we're talking about that really are affected by the boycott, that really stand out in your reporting on it.
So the defense products are the main aspect, and actually a $700 million contract with an Israeli company was canceled within the last few months due to this boycott. So the defense is the bulk of it. How much are we talking about what they call settlement wine being imported to Spain? That some of these things are small level. I think we're talking about there's some agricultural products and and other things like that, but that's not a huge thing. But the bigger question, like you asked, Jessica, is what are the bigger ramifications of all this? So, so like we said, this seems to be, the biggest country level boycott since the Arab League. Earlier this year in August, Slovenia also passed a similar type boycott of Israel of products from from the occupied territories as well as defense products. We're talking about a country of 2 million people or so and virtually zero trade with Israel. So that move was basically a symbolic move, in protest of Israel's operations. Spain's a bit of a different.
I'm curious, Zev, though. I'm going to flip it on you a little bit. There's a lot of Israeli tourist travel to Spain and to Slovenia, actually, as well. I'm curious how that will be affected by the boycott. Like, what are some of the things that you could see happening as a result of Israeli tourists in those two places, specifically Spain, of course?
I think in general, Israelis travel a lot. And the idea of traveling to Spain is going to be a lot less enticing. And if people from Spain can't stay in places, in the occupied territories, that it's yet another dent in the ongoing wars, in the ongoing narratives between these countries.
Overall, anything else that really stuck out for you as you reported on the boycott?
Well, so the big thing is the precedent this is setting. So Spain is kind of a large country. It's the 6th largest economy in Europe, and they've imported about $850 million of goods from Israel in the past year. So that's but that's something. But there's also a concern about other countries following. The big one specifically is Ireland, which is actually working on a similar legislation right now. It might be passed within the coming months. And Ireland does a lot more trade. We're talking about $3 billion worth of goods imported last year, mostly technology. They have multinationals like Intel, Google, and Microsoft there. And the prospects of getting these countries mixed up with potential boycotts. And then the United States has laws against boycotting, Israeli products. So there's a lot of potential for confusion and, over there. But if that all goes through, that could, be even more damaging for Israel and perhaps set other precedents for other countries as well.
Right. Okay. All right. Thanks for that, Zev. Diana, we're going to move to you and kind of a very different topic, although it does bring us to Israel's north, which Zev did refer to in his coverage. But really, we're looking at the city of Kiryat Shmona, which you've visited multiple times over the last 2+ years, and which, in theory, should be coming back to life after the war. But you didn't necessarily find that everyone is jumping back to move back there, or that life in that city has come back to what it was beforehand. Tell
Well,
us about
Jessica,
it.
it's the largest city on the border with Lebanon. It suffered a lot of attacks during the war, a lot of casualties, and only 60% of the residents are reported to have moved back. There's still damaged roads, shops are still closed, and the situation is still very challenging. But what I did find was the tennis center was open for the kids who returned back, and even though the manager of the center was still picking up shrapnel on the courts, and there's still a lot of damage, they've opened. They stay open through the evening, so kids there feel a sense of community. And there's also a food and agriculture high-tech incubator in Kiryat Shmona, and the two women who run it say they've started to move the needle. 5 more startups are going to move back, and they really want to change the ecosystem up there. So there was a real sense of difficulties along with a sense that people want to move back there and try to make the city alive again.
Is there also a sense that some people might not end up going back, like we've also heard about of the kibbutzim in the south in the Gaza envelope, that people have said, I'm done with Kiryat Shmona, I'm done with dealing with this kind of tension in my
Yes, the
daily
mayor
life?
said that in 10 years, the government has plans to build a railroad there, and Tel Chai College is going to be a university. And he feels that that will happen in Kiryat Shmona, would happen in Beersheba, that it will be a renaissance there. But he said, but that doesn't help us with tomorrow.
Right, right. So then and then does he have a sense of a plan for tomorrow, for bringing people back, for encouraging people back, or new people to move there? Is there also that kind of renaissance of people saying, we're
There
going
are
to support
people
this
moving
city?
back who want to give to the city, but it's still a city that is struggling.
Right, right. Okay, thanks for that update. We're going to go to a quick break. When we're back, we're going to go back to Zev talking about emigration and immigration having to do with Israel. So stay with us.
What if prayer doesn't work? This question strikes us as a distinctly modern one, an outgrowth of the slow disenchantment of the world. But in truth, the question is an old one, and one given space to breathe here.
Welcome to Thoughts and Prayers. I'm your host, Jessica Fisher. Join me on a deep exploration of the relationship between religion and modernity through personal stories, classical texts, and conversations with leading rabbis, scholars, and educators.
You're almost not supposed to be doing this interview.
Our prayers accumulate on God's doorstep, piled outside like an unimaginably tall stack of letters. We cannot give up on the relationship because God doesn't come to the door as quickly as we may like. So let's keep knocking. Perhaps the gates of compassion will be opened.
Join us every week on Thoughts and Prayers, wherever you get your podcasts.
So we're back from break, and Zev, you've also, in your diaspora coverage, have been looking at both emigration of Israelis leaving Israel in 2025 under the shadow of war, and immigration as other diaspora communities are looking for a different kind of life and reality. So I'm going to look at I want you to bring us through the negative numbers first. More than 69,000 Israelis left the country in 2025. Now, take us through that. And my biggest question is, do we know if that's permanent? What do we know about those numbers? Which is obviously hard for you to know, but I'm curious what you do know about that aspect of it.
Those numbers are actually only counted after people have spent most of the year out of the country, which means that when we talk about those 2025 numbers, most of those people actually left the country a year earlier. But we're talking about 69,000 people leaving in 2025 after a whopping 82,000 left the year earlier. So why is that? Israel's been going through a tough time in the past 2 years. Obviously, we've had 2 years of war, which have been very difficult. People also talk about unhappiness about the political situation within the country, specifically the judicial reforms of 2023, that actually apparently did leave a lot of people to leave the country at that time, maybe, frustrated about the direction the country was going or whatever it was. Um, so that's kind of the top line numbers. I'm going to jump now to the immigration numbers, which are a little bit more positive and round out the picture a little bit better. So when we talk about immigration, so the Central Bureau of Statistics published numbers for immigration last year. We actually have two different numbers. The Central Bureau of Statistics says that 24,000 people immigrated to Israel last year. For some reason, there's a small difference with the Immigration and Absorption Ministry's numbers. They show a little bit more than 22,000. I'm not exactly sure where the difference is, but let's talk about those numbers for a minute. So first of all, and there's like a little bit of nuance to understand these numbers. The first thing to look at is that those numbers are also lower than the past year. In 2024, we're talking about more than 32,000, new immigrants. So we're talking about 8,000 or so fewer immigrants, in 2025. So that's bad. That's a decline. But if you look closer at the numbers, there's kind of a different picture. It's important, I think, when we're talking about immigration, even to distinguish between two different groups. There's Russian immigration and the rest of the world. Russia has been the largest provider of new immigrants to Israel since the 1990s, and they've obviously done it continuously. They've done it, and a lot of Israel's economic growth is thanks to Russian immigration, but it kind of follows different rules than immigration from the rest of the world. Especially since the Russia's war with Ukraine in 2022, which caused a lot of people to leave. There were more than 40,000 people that left Russia in 2022, and that's been trickling down since. So we're going from 40,000 in 22, it's been coming down. In 2025, there were about 8,300, right, which is much lower. But, and again, so those numbers came down largely because the war's been going on for 3 years and where it's that part of the war. But that kind of skews the numbers. If we look at the immigration numbers without Russia, you get kind of a different picture. Immigration from the rest of the world actually rose by more than 20% during the year to more than 13,000. Which is great. Average immigration from non-Russian countries has been 10 to 11,000 in the past decades. So we're talking about a significant amount of new interest. From the US, we saw a rise of about 5% to 3,500. French immigration rose a lot, rose about 45% to 3,300. And the numbers also went up from the UK, Canada, South Africa, Australia, and other countries. So we're kind of getting the split picture of, on the one hand, we have Israelis leaving the country because they are frustrated with the war and other things going on. And on the other hand, we have people leaving due to antisemitism, perhaps as well as due to Zionist fervor. And so the number of people coming to the country has also been growing. Ultimately, the trade balance, the immigration balance is down by about 20,000, meaning the numbers of people leaving grew, the numbers of people coming grew, but overall we're down about 20,000 in the grand scheme of things.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. Let's move finally to Diana, who is giving us some of the good news of today's podcast, looking at sort of the recent reports about Israeli science and medical research. What really has stood out for you as you cover, as you cover what the different labs, hospitals, what they're working on, what they're trying to accomplish in their scientific research?
Well, I am awed by scientists here and the resilience and the diversity despite the war and the challenges. For example, at Weizmann Institute, which had a blow in June 2025 when the Iranian ballistic missile attack destroyed so many labs. But the scientists there are still going. The staff went out of their way immediately afterwards. People were going back and forth to different labs on golf carts and doing their experiments. Despite everything, there's still research being published. I just wrote about scientists who wrote about this tiny organism that is able to revamp its own RNA to survive in high heat, like volcanic craters, which really seems like a metaphor for Israel, that we're able to survive the high heat. And I didn't know that this organism also is used in laundry detergents to keep the high temperatures. So I have a
Interesting.
new
Okay.
feeling for laundry detergent these days. Right. And the
For
other
laundry.
amazing
Okay.
research was coming out of all the universities, but in the Technion, I spoke to two young women who are PhD students. One lives in the mostly Muslim village of town of Tamra, which also was attacked by Iran in June. And she and a woman who lives in Kfar Kama, which is a Circassian town. There, of the 5,000 members of the Circassian community, only two other women are PhDs, and she's one of them. And they teamed up with a professor there to research how cancer, whatever is in cancer, could help decrease people's heart conditions. They're using cancer, using something bad to produce something good in lab animals. So that was incredible to see.
Give us one more to end today's podcast.
Also, a man from Portugal, a microbiologist who lives in Eilat, and he studies the microbes that are found on coral reefs. And just
What actually happens there on the coral reefs?
the microbes on the coral reefs affect the entire area. They're the basis of the food chain of the Red Sea and in oceans around the world. And as climate warming and oceans are getting warmer and coral reefs are struggling, if the scientists are able to pinpoint what's happening to the microbes, it could serve as early warning signs for what could happen.
This is kind of what we used to do on the podcast, and with some good news. Not that there's so much good news out there, but it's nice to have these small bits and pieces. So thank you for sharing some of the reporting that you've both been doing over the last week plus, I would imagine. And we will see what this week brings. So thank you, Diana, and thank you, Zev, for being
Thank
with
you,
me on
Jessica.
today's Daily Briefing.
Thanks, Jessica.
And thanks to all of you for listening to the Times of Israel's Daily Briefing. Stay tuned for tomorrow's installment. This episode was produced by the Podwaves. As always, feel free to recommend us to other listeners and rate us wherever you find your podcasts. Until next time, have a good day and Shavuot Tov. Have a good week.